where does it it belongs, So we have mainly three streams of Shastras. So one is the Shruti, which is the Vedas. The second is the Puranas, which is, 18 Puranas. We covered one of them, the Bhagwat Puran. And the third one is the Itihas. So in Itihas, we have the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. So I just want to, because Bhagwad Gita belongs or comes in Mahabharata, so it is part of Itihas. And but in Vedant, there are three important, can I suggest something? Can we mute? All of us can mute, and then whenever anybody asks question, they can unmute. So we will start with that. So, so we have the first one is the most important is the Upanishads. The second is this Bhagwad Gita, and third is the Brahma Sutra. So all three are called Prasthanatrayi. So what is it called? Prasthanatrayi. So if anybody is making notes. So, but this particular text, Bhagwad Gita, comes under the Itihas portion in Bhagavatam, in Mahabharata. I'm so used to Bhagavatam now. So in Mahabharata. And so what we will do is, we will start with what exactly is Itihas according to the Shastric definition, not what the Western definition is. So Western definition is that it's history, but the Shastric definition is, once again, let me just check something out. The Shastric definition is that it is iti ha asa. See, these are the three, when you do the Sandhi Vichayad of Itihas, it says iti means thus indeed it happens, not even it happened. That means it is the possibilities of all situations or all possibilities that, so this is in Sanskrit, there is something called lit, so which means that when you want to explain something, you usually start with an example. Like, even in the stories, we say once upon a time, so once upon a time is basically saying that it looks like it is history, but it is basically a story to convey a message. So this Itihas is, we can take it as historical also. So I'm not saying it is not historical. So if it is historical, great. If it is not historical, also it is great. Because the message of Bhagwad Gita is what is most important. So, it reminds me of one, I think Kabir Das ji's verse, where somebody asked him, who is Ram? They say, Ram kaun hai? So he says, okay, there are four Ram, he says, ek Ram Dasarath ka beta, ek Ram ghat ghat mein leta, ek Ram jin jagat ubara, ek Ram in sab se nyara, which means that I see Ram in four places. One is a historical, okay, he's son of Dasarath and he did this. But the other one is where he is actually present in every atom of this universe. They say, Tulsidas used to say, oh, Siya Ram mein sab jag jani, karo pranam jor jug pani. That means I am seeing Bhagwan in everything. Every form is Bhagwan only. And then third is that he is the creator of all these forms also. So he is the one who created this Jagat. And fourth is he is also beyond that creator. So anyway, we can go, later into all these things which come under Bhagwad Gita. So actually I had saved the definition of itihas also. There is one itihas which I told you about, that how you break it up. The other is dharma artha kama mokshanam upadesha samanvitam purva vratam katha yuktam itihasam prachakshate. And this comes in Mahabharata itself. They are telling us what exactly does it, what is the purpose of this. He says it is where we have to learn about dharma, artha, kama, moksha, everything is talked about, and what are the all possibilities of that are also discussed in this itihas. So that is kind of a overview of that. And what I'll do is I'll pass on this article that that talks about what exactly is itihas. So anyways, so what we will do is we will, I'll start with a little background story of Mahabharat, where how this Mahabharat ended up in Bhagwad Gita. And we will then talk about the introduction given by Adi Shankara, because his commentary is supposed to be the most talked about. So we'll do that, and then we'll dive into, I think it will take us 2 weeks or so, or not 2 weeks, 2 or 3 classes to get over the introduction. All right. So let's talk about Mahabharata a little bit. So Mahabharata has the 100,000 plus verses. So it is the largest single text. If we combine all the Western philosophical texts, they don't even come even half of what Mahabharata is. So it is the greatest dharma grantha. Dharma grantha means which actually talks about what is dharma. And we will also get into the definition of dharma later on in the Bhagwad Gita itself. And just to give a brief introduction, it started off with 24,000 verses, and it was at that time called Bharat. And then it was later on called Jaya, and then it became Mahabharat. They kept adding on to it, and it's the same author, Vedavyas only did that. And so these are the kind of synonyms, some people call it Jaya, some people call it Mahabharat, some people call it Bharat, and but this is the same text. So, and we know the story. I'm not going to go over it, where Vedavyas actually compiled that whole story in his mind only, and then he said, "Okay, I have to write it down, but I'm not going to write down 100,000 words. I need a scribe who would do it for me." So he basically invited Ganesh ji to do that. And when he invited, they had, Ganesh ji said, "Okay, I have one condition, I don't waste time. So if you can keep on telling me, I'll keep on writing. But if you stop and and I see that I'm not getting anything, I'll drop and leave at that time." So Vedvyas said, okay, what to do. That's the best scribe in the world right now. So he said, okay, I will, but you have to promise me one thing. He says, you will only write once you have fully understood what I am telling you. So you will see that in Mahabharata, there are certain portions which are very, very difficult. So that must be the time when Vedvyas needed to take a break. So, so that's kind of, story told about how this Mahabharata was written. So anyways, so let's start with some of the glimpses of Mahabharata. So, in Bhagavatam, we talked about Parikshit and how he had been cursed, and then there was Takshak, that snake bit him, and in that point where he got the curse, and the time the Takshak bit him, he was in 7 days he got his realization. So that's the greatness of Bhagavatam. But in this case, Parikshit had a son named Janmajaya. So Janmajaya, when he found out that his father was basically killed by a snake, Takshak, he was very angry. So he said, I'll do a yajna and basically destroy all snakes. I'll get rid of every snake in this universe. So, and Takshak was, there is a background story which I'm not going to cover right now. So Takshak then decided to run away when he heard about it. So he was under the protection of Indra. So anyway, so this is he invited all the the learned Brahmins to start this yajna. They said, okay, we'll start this yajna and we'll destroy all the snakes. And that was called the Sarp Satra Yajna. So when they started this yajna, all these snakes started to come and themselves like dropped into the yajna fire. And it started to happen. And after some time, this guy asked, what happened? Why is it that I don't see Takshak yet? So he says, well, then they did this research and found out that Takshak was under the protection of Indra. And he says, okay, then why don't we get Indra also into this? So he was so upset about it. He said, Indra ko bhi bulao. And so when Indra heard about it, he just went to Brahmaji and said, this is what is happening, please protect us. So then he told Vedavyasa. So Vedavyasji, along with his disciple, whose name was Vaishampayana. So Vaishampayana and Vedavyasji went to our Janmajaya. And they said, Beta, kya kar rahe ho? This is not befitting of such a, your lineage is so wonderful. You come from such a great background and you are doing destruction like this. This is not befitting you, So then after explaining all these things, then he said, okay, all right, I'll stop it, So he stopped that yajna. And then he asked this question to Vaishampayana. He says, tell me about my ancestry, where, because, my grandparents, all the Pandavas had gone by that time. They had gone and they were all like, but he had not heard about the greatness of all the ancestors. So he says, okay. So he started talking about the ancestry of the Kuru Vansha. So this is called the Kuru dynasty. So Kuru dynasty had a great king Bharata. So he talks about Bharata, and then he starts to talk about Shantanu. And because I think you guys all know the story, so I'm gonna cut it short. But if you want more details, I'll go ahead and start telling the stories. So Shantanu was a great king, and there is a background to this story also in Mahabharata. Every story has Punarjanama story also, that in the past, in the previous life, he was a great king in the Ikshvaku Vaku dynasty. And at that time, he was helping out the Devatas to win a war against the Daityas. So in that war, they won. So there was some party going on, and in that party, Brahmaji was also invited. And so they saw that, and at that time his name was Mahabhisha. Mahabhish was looking at Ganga, who was the goddess, and he was very infatuated with Ganga. And that time Brahmaji saw that, what is this guy doing? So he said, okay, you know what, this is not right. You shouldn't be doing it. You are behaving like a mortal, so you go back to earth. And also this Ganga is going to be cause of your suffering, though she will be with you, but she will also give you a lot of pain. So anyway, so he became Shantanu, and then one day he met Ganga, and they decided to get married. And Ganga, like any other woman, said, I have one condition. You will never ask me about what I am doing. The moment you stop me or say that why I am doing something, that day I will leave. He said, fine, I'll just keep quiet. And so a few years went by, and she got pregnant. And when they had their first kid, as you know the story, Ganga took the kid and, put it in the river, Ganges, and that kid drowned. So Shantanu saw this and he was devastated. He says, what the heck is going on? What is my wife up to? And so anyway, another kid, same story, took the kid, she dropped it in the river, that kid died. So it happened 7 times. And eighth time, Shantanu said, forget about the vow. I'm going to get hold of Ganges and ask her, what is she doing? So he did ask, and she said, okay, now that you have asked me, I'm going to go. But I'll tell you that these 8 were Vasus. Vasus is one category of Devatas, There were 8 of them, and they were cursed by Vasishta. And in that they had to take a birth, as a mortal. But because they had to take a birth, Vashishti had kind of leniently said, okay, if they are born, they can, quickly die and go back to their Vasu status, as a Devata. So this is how the 7 have done. But the 8th one, who was the reason for that curse, he had to suffer. So he says, okay, you know what? I'm going to take this child with me, but when he turns 16, he'll come back to you. So Gangaji took the kid with her, and 16 years later, Shantanu saw that there is some bright guy, young guy, who has who is doing some, archery in near the Ganges, and he has, with his arrows, he was able to basically block the flow of river. So he was very impressed. He said, okay, he walked over to the kid. At that time, Gangaji appeared as a, goddess, and said, okay, here is your kid, and his name is Devabrata. So he is going to be staying with you now. So Shantanu was very happy. So he said, okay, you are going to be the crowned prince, and we'll go from there. So this is, everything was going very well. And then one day, Devabrata found out that his dad is staying very quiet. He's like really, in a very different mood. So he found out from the charioteer, what is happening with my father? He's not the same. So he says, well, he's in love with this lady, her name is, what's her name? Satyavati. But there was this problem. So let's go to the story of Satyavati. So Satyavati was a fisherwoman. So there were a couple of names given to her. One of them was Matsya Gandha. She was known as who smelled like a fish, and she was also known as Kali because of her color, I guess, So this is the background story, So Satyavati was once helping people cross over the river. She was like a boat woman. And at that time, there was a Rishi Parashar who came, and he says, he saw this lady, and somehow he had this vision that if she has a child from me, that child will be the greatest Rishi of all times. So basically he proposed to Satyavati. He says, well, if you are a mother of my child, we will have such a brilliant child who will be the Rishi of all times, So she says, no, I can't do that, for many reasons. One, we are not married. Second, I am Matsya Gandha, I smell like a fish. Why would you want to have a child with me? And he says, don't worry about it, we will have a child, and that child is, once it's born, I'll take care of that child. You don't have to worry about it. Nobody has to know about it. And you will, you will retain your youth forever, So Satyavati was, okay, whatever you say, Rishiji. And they had this child, and the child went with his father, which is Rishi Parashar. And after that, they say that she was from the Matsya Gandha. She became Yojana Gandha. That means her fragrance was emitting like for 8 miles, Yojan is 8 miles. So, and she was very beautiful, so it's not like she was not beautiful, but so after some time, all this happened. Maybe years later, when Shantanu saw her, he fell for her, and he approached her father and said, sir, I want to marry your daughter, and I'm the king and belong to this Kuru dynasty and all that things. He says, okay, I have no problems. You can marry my daughter. I only have one condition, that the child born from this marriage will rule your kingdom. He says, but how can I do that? I have a Yuvaraj, I have the crown prince, which is Devavrat. So I cannot do that. So he left, So that's when Devavrata heard about it. He says, okay, you know what? I have to do something about it. I have to go and talk to the fisherman. And he says, well, he went as with the proposal of his father. He says, I would like my father to marry your daughter. You have any problems? He says, no, I told your father, I have no problems, except that the kids born out of that marriage will be the rulers of this kingdom. He says, yeah, that's fine. I have no problem. They can rule. I won't, be part of it. He says, okay, that's great. Great to know. But what about your kids? What if they start to claim the kingdom, So what will happen? And that's the time that he took a vow that he would take the vow of celibacy. He will, not marry. He will never have kids. All these, the story. At that time, there was a Akashvani. And that's the time when from that time onwards, he was known as Bhishma. Bhishma is like a very strong person, he's the one who could take such a, he was basically abstinent from all the bhogas of the world. He says, I will be loyal to the throne. He took all that, loyalty to his father, loyalty to the throne, all these things he committed. So the marriage happened, and after that, they had two sons, there was Chitrangada and Vichitravirya. So two kids were born to her and to Shantanu. And after that, Shantanu had died. He was very old at that time. And so these two kids, they were growing up, but before anything happened, the Chitrangada died. He died very young. So Vichitravirya was the one remaining. And but nobody was giving their daughter to him. He wasn't very strong or very powerful guy. So at that time, Satyavati called Bhishma and said, find a bride for my son. He says, okay. And there was some Swayamvar going on in Kashi, and he went there and he basically kidnapped the three daughters, who were part of the Swayamvar, Amba, Ambika, Ambalika, and brought them over. But when he brought them over, the oldest one, Amba, said, you know what? I was already in love with another person. His name is Shalva. And I had already decided that I was going to get married. So I don't think I can marry anybody else. He says, okay. He sent a few of his people and said, take him to Shalva. So they went, and that king said, well, you know what? I have lost you anyway, so I'm not going to get married to you. So she came back and said, he's not accepting me, so you better marry me now. So Bhishma said, well, I have this vows that I have taken, so I can't marry you. And so then she went away and did a lot of tapas. So that's the story of Amba. We'll come to that some other time. The Ambika and Ambalika. So this guy, did not have any children, and Vichitravirya also died. So Satyavati was very upset that, you know what, I had these two kids and they both are dead, and I have these two daughter-in-laws, but no kids. So who is going to take care of the kingdom? So there was some pratha at that time. They said, okay, you know what, if they can conceive through somebody close by, So he said, you know what, why don't we invite Vedavyasa? He's my son, and through him we will have the lineage continue. So anyway, to cut the story short, so they had these two kids, Pandu and Dhritarashtra, and they had a third one from a Dasi. His name was Vidur. So these were the three main characters of our Mahabharata. So Pandu then got married to who did he get married to? Prathi. She was married to Kunti, and the Dhritarashtra, who was born blind, so he was married to Gandhari from Gandhar, and so there are more stories in that, but just to continue our side of the stories, we'll come to the main points. So Kunti, now to give the little background about Kunti. Kunti was at that time very well known for her beauty, for her, smarts. She was also Bhua of Krishna, So they were also related. And first cousins, So Kunti had a boon from Durvasa Rishi because she served him at one time and he was very pleased. He's usually the one who's cursing everybody, but for her, he was very pleased and gave her a boon that if she prays to a particular god, then she can basically have a child of that god, So some powers were there, which we are not aware of today. So when she got this boon, she said, okay, let me test it out, whether it is really working or not. And that time she prayed to the Surya Dev, and immediately she had Karna as her son, who was born with a golden kundal and, on some other, ornaments on his body. And he said, what has happened? I am suddenly a mother and I'm not even married. So she was very, very scared. So she basically put her in Karna in a basket and put him in the river. And he was rescued by somebody who was basically a Sarathi, and he took care of Karna, and he was also known as Sutaputra. So that is the story of Karna. And then when she was married to Pandu, they didn't have any children. So through this boon, she was able to have Yudhishthira from the Dharmaraj, which is also the Lord of Death. And from Pavanadev, he had Bhima, and from Indra, she had Arjuna. And there was another wife of Pandu, Madri. She had two kids, basically, from Ashwini Kumara. Ashwini Kumaras are the twin gods, who are basically the doctors of the gods. So they had Sahadeva and Nakul. So that's how the Pandavas were born. And Gandhari didn't have any kids. So she said, okay, let me invite Vedvyas. He seems to have the magic. So Vedvyas said, you know what, it doesn't look like it's your kids are going to be any good, so if you don't have kids, that's fine, just bear with it. Said, no, 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 I have to have kids, it's very important. So did Dhritarashtra. They basically prayed to Vedvyasa, and he says, okay, I'll give you a boon. You will have, and then after some time, something was born, but it was like a lump, so what is this, I was expecting a kid and now I have a lump here. So he says, okay, do one thing. You have 100 pots, put pieces of it in 100 of these pots, and they will slowly um, become children, so that's the story, how the 100 came, so we always think about how could she have 100 kids. So but the story is that this is how it happened. And once she had, slowly these kids started to come. The first one, Duryodhana, was born. And they say at that time, such bad omens were happening, all the dogs were barking and the donkeys were braying as if something evil is happening now. So anyway, so all the 100 were born, and in the Pandus, the 5 were also born. So we have both sides now ready. So so this is up to the point when everything was happening normally. Normally means this is all, in Mahabharata, there are so many weird things that happen, so we, because they say that anything that you can think of has happened in Mahabharata. Yeah. So that is the beauty of Mahabharata. So it all possibilities, as we talked about, it is all possibilities are there. So it is the, so in the Kauravas, the Duryodhan was kind of very mean-spirited, from the beginning itself. He didn't have any love for anybody except for himself, so especially he was very anti-Bhim, because he thought Bhim was the strongest and he has to somehow defeat him, So what we are seeing here is the background of Mahabharata. Why did this war actually happen? So this happened because of all the animosities that were created between these two families, mostly because of the Duryodhan. So just background in this. So Pandu had died, so Pandu was dead. So and when he died, at that time, Madhuri also said, okay, I'm also not gonna live. So she also died with him. So with the 5 kids, Bhishma invited Kunti to come and stay with them. When they were staying with them, they felt a little tension between the 2 sets of kids. And but anyway, they were growing up, and at that time they found this teacher, Drona, and there's a story of Drona also, but we'll skip that. So Drona started as the teacher for both sets of kids, the Kauravas and the Pandavas. So Kauravas and Pandavas were learning from Dronacharya, and he was, and he found that Arjuna was the best, among the students. So So he was kind of paying extra attention to Arjuna. So there are a lot of stories around, how this learnings happened, but a couple of stories to indicate how Arjuna was excelling, So there's a story about that his Dronacharya said, okay, I'm going to have a test for you guys. And in that he kept a bird. You all know the story. I'm just gonna, in a very brief, so everybody came and said, okay, you know what? He asked, do you see a bird? Duryodhan said, yeah, I see a bird. Do you see anything else? Yeah, he says, I see the tree, I see the branches, I see the leaves, all that stuff. He says, okay, forget it, next. And until it came to the turn of Arjuna, he says, okay, what do you see? He says, I only see the eye of the bird that I'm going to hit. He says, okay, why don't you fire your arrow? And it hit exactly, in the eye of that bird. So that proved to Dronacharya that this guy is the best. And then came the story where he wanted to test who is really, the smartest, who has the presence of mind. So he created one scenario where he said, I'm going to take a bath in the river. And while he went in the river, there was a alligator that caught him, and he started shouting, help, help, but nobody could do anything. And at that time, Arjuna basically picked up his arrow and killed the make-believe alligator that Drona has basically created from his Maya. And so that's the story where he saw the presence of mind of Arjuna. Then there are stories of Eklavya and other things, but the important thing about the character of Duryodhan. So Duryodhan was so mean that he decided to poison Bhim. So he invited him, when you invite Bhim for lunch or anything, there is never a no for an answer, right? So he was a foodie, from the beginning. So he said, okay, let's poison him. So they put poison in his food. And so when he ate, he fainted. When he fainted, they took him and put it in the river. So the story goes that there were some snakes that bit him, because the poison kills poison, something like that. And they saw that this guy didn't die because of our poison. They took him to Varundev, who was basically the devata of the water. And he says, well, he is Bhima, he's the Pavan Putra, he's my best buddy's son. So he says, okay, he basically revived him and said, okay, I'll give you some extra powers that you will need in the future. So anyway, that's the story of Bhima. And then there is this story of Lakshagraha. And so I think what we'll do is we'll stop here. We'll finish this background of Mahabharat on Thursday. And we will also do the introduction of Bhagwad Gita by what Adi Shankara had to say about it. And we'll go from there. But if you guys have any questions, we can take now, and
yeah, I have a question, Rajiv ji.
Yes.
You mentioned Vasampayan, and I'm trying to learn Vishnu Sahasranama by attending Sudhaji's class. And in there, Vasampayan comes
Yep.
And I always
Vaishampayana
wondered,
Uvacha. Yep,
yeah,
that's true.
who is Vaishampayana?
Vaishampayana
Is
was
he a
the
narrator
student.
or?
No, he was a student or the disciple of Vedavyasa,
Oh,
who is actually he is the main narrator of this Mahabharata.
I see.
Vaishampayan is telling the story of Mahabharata to Janmajaya, who is the grandson of Abhimanyu, great grandson of Arjuna.
Okay.
So Janmajaya is the son of Parikshit who wants to learn about his ancestry. So basically, see, like Sutji was the narrator for the story of Bhagavatam. Same way, Vaishampayana is the narrator
It's
of
the
the
narrator. Okay.
Mahabharata. Yes.
Okay. So Vishnu Sahasranam came at the same time, Mahabharata.
Vishnu Sahasranam is part of Mahabharata.
I see.
So Vishnu
Okay.
Sahasranam happens when, after the war, Yudhishthir has this question in his mind that he's as, he was devastated at seeing all his people dead. He saw all his cousins dead. He was in a remorse. He was, full of sorrow. And he says, a big adharma has happened from me. I have done a great sin. So he went to Krishna, just like Arjuna and Krishna had this Bhagwad Gita. He went to Krishna and said, please, I am drowning in this sorrow. So why don't you help me with this? He says, well, I have done my job with Arjuna. I'll take you to the guy who will teach you about dharma. Okay. So he takes him to Bhishma Pitama, who was lying on the bed of arrows.
Arrows, yeah.
And he says, please help Yudhishthira. And that's where the Vishnu Sahasranam happens. It's also part of Mahabharata only. It's
That's
not
good to know.
it is not a different text. Yeah, it's part of Mahabharata.
Okay, thank you. It's good to know.
Yeah. All right. So I think the story will continue a little bit more tomorrow. I thought I'll finish it today, but it's a lot of stories. It's like intertwined, too many stories, but we will wrap it up tomorrow, and then we'll start with the Adi Shankara's introduction, and then we will dive into the first chapter, because it's a big text, and it's really important one because it's part of Prasthan Trayi. So if you want to learn Vedanta, they say there is no better book than Bhagwad Gita. And also they say it is not just Vedanta, it is Vedartha. Vedartha means it has everything in it. It has the karma, bhakti, gyan, all into one text. And it is the other, well, anyway, we'll discuss it next time. But if there are other questions, we can talk about it.
Rajiv ji, you've said the story so beautifully. I was just picturing the scenes in my mind. It was very, very nicely done.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Rajiv, Shantanu had 8 sons. 7 of them were Vasus. They disappeared.
8 of them, actually.
And
he was also Vasu.
8 was Bhishma, or 9th was Bhishma?
No, 8th was Bhishma. 7 were drowned.
So 7 disappeared.
Yeah.
8 was Bhishma. And then he had 2 more sons with Satyavati.
Yes, correct.
But the Vyasa was Satyavati through that other saint, right? Parashar.
Yes. Yeah.
So Vyasa is not Shantanu's son.
No.
Only Satyavati's
So basically,
son.
if you look at the lineage, if you see from the the male side of things, then yes, their dynasty ended there. So it was Satyavati's son from previous relationship that helped,
keep up the
dynasty. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. See, this is such a amazing text. It has everything that you can imagine, it is there.
Sir, the growing up of the Kauravas was more influenced by Shakuni, I think.
Yes, yes.
And he was doing it all for his revenge, I guess. So
his revenge, yes. He wanted to destroy this whole dynasty.
The Kuru
basically.
family.
Yeah. He was not happy when his sister got married to a blind guy.
Blind person.
Yeah, he says, what is this, So he couldn't do anything in front of Bhishma. But he said, okay, because he was a very cunning person. So he used his cunningness to damage that whole dynasty. So he poisoned the minds of Kauravas. Yeah. See, Dhritarashtra was blind. And Gandhari had put a blindfold for herself. See, that is what we have to understand, that not only that the intellect was blind, but that the vichar that could have helped this Dhritarashtra also put a blindfold. That was a mistake. She should have kept her eyes open to help him more. But she was, there is a good analogy given about it. So that why should Gandhari have done this? This didn't make sense. But anyway, she did it to prove herself that, okay, if you are blind, I'll stay blind even if I am not born blind.
Yeah.
All right.
They say love is blind, so
I know.
Rajiv, one quick question. So you were talking about various devta, right? And so on, and then the other characters. So when you think of different, realms, just a manushya, like the human realm and the god realm and everything. So according to the way you're telling the story, they could communicate with the gods or whatever. There was all kinds of interactions going on. So were they all kind of divine beings, or in that era, there was a different kind of era where, due to their, I don't know, virtuosity or virtue or something like that, there was such communication between humans and gods? I mean, I get confused sometimes because it seems like the different kinds of beings, like you may also mention the snake realm. I mean, the lower realms.
There's all kinds of realms. Yes. Actually, that it doesn't mean that it was there at that time. It is not there here now. It's just that we are not in that mindset. We have become, let's put it this way, that we have become intellectually so limited in our thinking because of that we think what we see is real. So everything that we see and experience is only real. Anything that we cannot see and do or touch is not there. So the science has, science is wonderful. I'm not against science. So science is amazing, but it has a lot of limitations, because it assumes a lot of things about the reality of things. What is truth? What is and science doesn't answer the questions about shoka, moha. All these things are not there in the realm of science. So So we are actually limited by science. So intellectually, we are limited to that. But if we were, as a kid, we were talked about these things, that they are real, then we would start to see things in a different light altogether.
Right, but essentially there were wise beings in all these different realms. Sometimes we think of the realms as, some are higher and some are lower, but looks like in the way you're describing it, anyone could practice yajna or attain wisdom or powers from any of the realms, right? It just happens to be different realms. Yeah.
See, we don't do the yagnas the way they used to do it before, So the powers that they accumulated was different kind of powers. Right now, our powers are coming from external sources, what we call as machines or equipments. So they had powers which were mental, which was different, We don't work on those powers anymore. We don't rely on those powers. Like power of intuition, simple things. So power of intuition is not as strongly, certified by science.
But although anyone could do the yagnas and attain these siddhis through mantras or whatever sacrifice, that did not automatically come with wisdom or viveka in terms of how to do the right thing.
No, that is true. Wisdom had nothing to do with karma kand. Karma kand is repetitive. You are given a certain things, you do it, and you get this.
That's like tapasya. Anyone can attain those things.
Yeah,
okay.
But you have to do it to attain it.
Actually, science, as Rajesh said, that intuition has not been considered scientific, sort of, right?
Yeah.
Now, the reason is that the science that we are doing is purely objective science, and reductionist approach is applied there.
Yeah.
Whereas intuition is the holistic, entire brain functioning concept. So, if with reduction forever, for the entire, as long as Earth exists, if this is the reductionist idea, you'll never understand intuition, ever.
True. Very true. It's, there are other things like intuition also that we don't know anymore.
Yeah.
Because we are limited by our scientific brain now. It is very empirical. So we work on data now. That's it. Yeah.
We are more driven by Praman than.
Yes. We are driven by Praman.
Than faith, I guess.
No, Praman is important. Praman is very important. Praman is not, you can undermine the Praman. What I'm talking about is the empirical data, means the data that we collect based on our observations. So our observation are limited because of the indriyas that are observing are limited. So see, our eyes can only see a certain spectrum, right? Vibgyor. Or our ears can hear only a certain decibel of sounds. But there is a lot more to this world than what we see and observe, right? So that is why our knowledge is limited to what we can observe. We cannot go beyond what our observations are.
What you're saying is that we have transcendental faculties that we're ignoring, even though we could have access to them if we quiet our mind or whatever.
We have access to them, except we don't know how to use it. See, it is, see that the whole paramparas have gone that used to have that. So it's not that we don't, let's not worry about it right now, because that's not going to fetch us much. What we should focus on is what are my current problems that I cannot solve through science. My shoka and moha cannot go from science. Science, right. It doesn't have a solution. So there is no book in our curriculum all the way to master's or PhD program that says how to get rid of your shoka, or sorrows. So, all right. So let's conclude today's class, and then we'll meet again 7 p.m. on Thursday.
Yes, sir.
All right. Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. All right.
Great. Good to see everybody. And just one person I don't recognize here. Nikhil, I see. So could you please identify yourself?
Ruplaji, this is my friend. Most probably, is it Vijaya?
Yes, Srila, this is Vijaya.
Okay. Her son's name, I think.
Welcome, Vijayaji.
Thank you so much.
All
Wonderful.
right.
We'll see you all on Thursday then.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good night, everyone. Hari.